When a 13-year-old boy saw his mother in handcuffs at court, he stayed silent. But when the judge asked him to speak, his words made everyone weep. Jordan's hands were sweating. He wiped them on his jeans for the 20th time, sitting alone on the hard wooden bench outside courtroom 4B of the Baltimore Juvenile Court. The air conditioning blasted cold air against his face, but his palms wouldn't stop sweating. A clock on the wall showed 8:47 a.m. His mother's hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Each minute felt like an hour as he watched people walk past. Lawyers in suits carrying briefcases, court officers in uniforms, other families looking just as nervous as he felt. "Everything will be okay, honey," Mrs. Martinez, his social worker, had told him earlier. She sat next to him now, occasionally patting his knee when his legs started bouncing up and down. But Jordan knew she couldn't promise that. Nothing felt okay about seeing his mother in handcuffs. The night before played over and over in his mind. He had been doing homework at the kitchen table when he heard his mother crying in her room. It wasn't the first time. He'd gotten used to the sound over the past few months, ever since she lost her second job at the convenience store. But this time was different. This time she had been arrested. "Jordan?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Kevin from his math class standing there, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. I heard about your mom. My dad's a clerk here, so—" Jordan's stomach twisted. He nodded slightly, but couldn't find any words. Kevin hesitated, then walked away to join a small group of other kids from school who were gathering near the water fountain. Their whispers and quick glances in his direction made Jordan's face burn. "Don't mind them," Mrs. Martinez said quietly. "Focus on what's important right now." What was important was that his mother, who had worked 2 jobs for as long as he could remember, who had never missed one of his school events even when she was exhausted, who somehow managed to keep food on the table even after his father left 3 years ago, his mother was about to be led into a courtroom in handcuffs. For stealing food. From a supermarket. The memory of the police officers at their door 2 days ago was still fresh. They had been polite but firm as they explained the situation. Security cameras had caught her concealing items in her purse: bread, peanut butter, some fruit, lunch meat. Basic things. Things they used to be able to afford before everything fell apart. Jordan's throat felt tight as he remembered his mother's face when they took her away. She had looked at him with such shame and fear, trying to smile through her tears. "It's going to be all right, baby," she had said. "Mrs. Martinez will take care of you until this is sorted out. Be strong for me, okay?" More people were filing into the courthouse now. Jordan recognized Mr. Thompson, the supermarket manager, walking past with a serious expression. He didn't look at Jordan. A few minutes later, a sharp-featured woman in a black suit strode by. The prosecutor, Jordan guessed. His heart began to pound harder. "Jordan?" It was Mrs. Martinez again. "They're ready for us to go in now." He stood up, his legs feeling shaky. The wooden doors of courtroom 4B loomed before him, dark and imposing. Through the small windows, he could see people taking their seats inside. Somewhere in there, his mother was waiting. "Remember what we talked about?" Mrs. Martinez said gently. "Just tell the truth when they ask you questions. That's all anyone expects." But Jordan knew it wasn't that simple. The truth was complicated. The truth was that his mother had broken the law. Yes, but she had done it to feed him. The truth was that she had tried everything else first, picking up extra shifts when she could, selling their TV and his father's old records, even asking their church for help. The truth was that sometimes, when she thought he was asleep, he heard her in the kitchen opening empty cupboards over and over, as if food might magically appear. A court officer held the door open. "Please enter quietly and take your seats," he instructed. The small crowd from the hallway began filing in. Jordan took one last deep breath and wiped his sweaty palms one more time. As he stepped through the doorway, the cold air of the courtroom hit him like a wall. The room was bigger than he expected, with high ceilings and rows of wooden benches. At the front, an elevated platform held a large desk where the judge would sit. He followed Mrs. Martinez to a seat in the front row. His classmates and their parents filled in the benches behind him, their whispers echoing in the quiet room. Mr. Thompson sat on the opposite side with the prosecutor. Everyone was waiting. A side door opened, and a court officer stepped through. "All rise," he called out. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Thompson presiding. Jordan stood with everyone else, his heart thundering in his chest. This was it. In a few minutes, they would bring in his mother. In a few minutes, he would have to look her in the eye and tell the truth, whatever that meant. For now, all he could do was wait. The judge entered, her black robes flowing as she took her seat. She was an older woman with steel-gray hair and glasses that seemed to pierce right through you. Jordan had heard stories about Judge Thompson, about how strict she was, especially with repeat offenders. His mother had been caught trying to take food before, but they had let her go with a warning. Not this time. Be seated, Judge Thompson commanded, her voice sharp and clear in the quiet courtroom. As everyone sat down, she shuffled some papers on her desk and looked out at the assembled crowd. For a brief moment, her eyes met Jordan's, and he quickly looked down at his hands. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, we're ready to proceed with the case of State versus Sarah Williams, charged with petty theft and trespassing. Bring in the defendant, Judge Thompson ordered. The side door opened again. Jordan held his breath. His mother walked in, hands cuffed in front of her, wearing the same blue nurse's scrub she had on when they arrested her. Her head was bowed, but as she passed Jordan's row, she glanced at him quickly. The look in her eyes nearly broke him. Love and fear and shame all mixed together. As she was led to her seat beside her court-appointed lawyer, Jordan fought back tears. He had to be strong now. He had to find a way to tell the truth without betraying the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. The judge's gavel cracked through the air like a gunshot, making him jump. Court is now in session. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jordan watched his mother sit down next to her lawyer. Her hands shook as she tried to smooth her wrinkled scrubs. She looked smaller somehow, shrunk by the huge wooden chair and the weight of the handcuffs. Ms. Williams, Judge Thompson began, peering over her glasses, you were charged with petty theft and trespassing at Martin's Supermarket on North Avenue. How do you plead? Jordan's mother cleared her throat. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Guilty, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jordan felt the stares of his classmates burning into the back of his neck. Kevin's dad, the court clerk, was typing something on his computer, the clicks echoing in the quiet room. Very well, Judge Thompson said. Mr. Peterson, you may present the state's evidence. The prosecutor stood up, straightening his tie. He was tall and thin, with sharp features and cold eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. The state would like to begin by showing security footage from the evening in question. A screen lowered from the ceiling at the front of the courtroom. Jordan's heart started racing. He hadn't seen the footage yet. He only knew what the police had told him. The video was grainy, but clear enough. There was his mother, still in her scrubs after her hospital shift, walking through the produce section. She picked up some apples, looked at the price, then put them back. She did the same with a loaf of bread, a package of chicken, a jar of peanut butter. Each time, her shoulders slumped a little more. Then she started putting things in her purse, quickly, furtively, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Bread first, then peanut butter, then some fruit and lunch meat. Basic things. Things they needed. As you can see, Mr. Peterson said, his voice hard, Ms. Williams deliberately concealed these items in her bag with clear intent to steal. Jordan couldn't look away from the screen. He wanted to close his eyes, but they stayed fixed on his mother's desperate movements. He could read the shame in every line of her body. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, this was not an isolated incident. Mr. Thompson, the store manager, had previously caught Ms. Williams attempting to steal food on 2 separate occasions. Both times, he chose not to press charges out of sympathy for her situation. However, this pattern of behavior cannot continue. Mr. Thompson stood up to testify. He looked uncomfortable but determined. That's correct, Your Honor. The first time was about 3 months ago. She had hidden some bread and cheese in her bag. I saw how embarrassed she was, and she explained about losing her second job. So I let her go with a warning. Jordan's mother stared at her hands, tears dropping silently onto the table. The second time, prompted Mr. Peterson. 2 weeks later. More food items, cereal, milk, some fruit. Again, I chose not to involve the police. I even offered to help her apply for food assistance programs. Did she take you up on that offer? No, Sir, she said she'd already tried those programs but was denied because her primary nursing job put her just over the income limit. The prosecutor nodded. And this third time? Mr. Thompson sighed. Store policy required me to call the police. We can't just let people keep stealing, no matter the reason. Jordan's hands clenched into fists under the table. He wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that they didn't understand. His mother worked so hard. She wasn't a criminal. She was just trying to feed her son. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, the prosecutor said. Now, I'd like to call Jordan Williams to the stand. The room spun. Jordan felt Mrs. Martinez squeeze his shoulder as he stood up on shaky legs. The walk to the witness stand felt like miles. He could hear whispers from his classmates, could feel everyone's eyes following him. The bailiff approached with a Bible. Place your right hand on the Bible and raise your left hand, he instructed. Jordan did as he was told, his palms sweaty against the leather cover. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? I do, Jordan managed to say, his voice cracking. The prosecutor approached the stand. His shoes clicked against the floor with each step. Jordan, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell us about your home situation. Has your mother been struggling financially? Jordan glanced at his mother. She gave him a small nod, tears still streaming down her face. Yes, sir, he answered. Ever since she lost her second job. And how has that affected your daily life? Jordan swallowed hard. We've had to cut back on things. Sold some stuff. The TV. Some furniture. My dad's old records. Is your father in the picture? No. Sir, he left 3 years ago. Doesn't send any money. The prosecutor nodded sympathetically, but his eyes remained cold. Has there ever been a time when there wasn't enough food in the house? The question hit Jordan like a punch to the stomach. He remembered the empty cupboards, the hollow feeling in his belly, the sound of his mother crying in her room when she thought he was asleep. Sometimes he whispered, "Can you speak up, please?" Sometimes, he said louder, his voice shaking. But Mom always made sure I ate, even if it meant she didn't. A soft gasp came from somewhere in the courtroom. Jordan saw his mother close her eyes, fresh tears falling. Did you know your mother was stealing food? No, Jordan said quickly. Too quickly. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. Really? You never noticed extra food appearing in the house? Never wondered where it came from? Jordan's throat felt tight. He looked at his mother again, saw the defeat in her posture, the way her shoulders curved inward as if trying to make herself smaller. I guess I didn't want to know, he admitted finally. I was just hungry. The prosecutor's voice softened slightly. Jordan, I know this is hard, but we need to understand the full situation. How often would you say there wasn't enough food in the house? Jordan's vision blurred with tears. More and more lately. Maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And what would happen on those days? Mom would say she already ate at work, but I could hear her stomach growling. She'd make sure I had something, even if it was just a peanut butter sandwich. Sometimes she'd say she was trying a new diet or that she wasn't feeling well. But I knew she was lying, so I wouldn't worry. The prosecutor turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Thompson looked at Jordan with an unreadable expression. You may step down. As Jordan walked back to his seat, his legs felt like they might give out. He had told the truth, just like Mrs. Martinez said to do. But why did telling the truth feel so much like betrayal? The prosecutor was gathering his papers. The state rests, Your Honor. Judge Thompson nodded. We'll take a 15-minute recess before hearing from the defense. Court is in recess. Her gavel cracked through the air again. People started standing up, stretching, moving towards the doors. But Jordan stayed frozen in his seat, watching as his mother was led back through the side door, her handcuffs clicking with each step. Just before she disappeared through the doorway, she looked back at him. Her eyes were full of love and something else, pride, maybe, or relief. She managed a small smile, and then she was gone. Jordan felt Mrs. Martinez's hand on his shoulder again. You did well, she said softly. You told the truth. That's all anyone could ask. But Jordan wasn't so sure. As he sat there in the emptying courtroom, watching his classmates file out while whispering and stealing glances at him, he wondered if the truth was enough. He wondered what would happen when his mother came back, when the defense presented their case, when the judge made her decision. Most of all, he wondered how telling the truth could hurt so much. The 15-minute recess felt like seconds. Jordan barely had time to use the bathroom, his hands shaking so badly he could hardly turn on the faucet to wash them. When he returned to the courtroom, everything looked different somehow, sharper, more real. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Thompson returned to her seat. Jordan stood with everyone else, his legs unsteady. His mother was led back in, still in handcuffs, still in her wrinkled scrubs. She looked like she'd been crying during the break. "Be seated," Judge Thompson said. "Mr. Richards, you may present your defense." His mother's court-appointed lawyer stood up. He was younger than the prosecutor, with kind eyes and slightly rumpled suit. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to recall Jordan Williams to the stand." Jordan's heart stopped. He hadn't expected to testify again. Mrs. Martinez gave his hand a quick squeeze as he stood up on wobbly legs. The walk to the witness stand felt even longer this time. He could hear his pulse in his ears, could feel sweat breaking out on his forehead. After he was sworn in again, Mr. Richards approached with a gentle smile. "Jordan," he began, "I know this is difficult, but I need you to help us understand something. Can you tell us about your mother? Not just about recent events, but what kind of person she is." Jordan gripped the edge of the witness stand. His throat felt dry. She's the hardest working person I know. She's been a nurse for 15 years. Even when she had 2 jobs, she never missed any of my school events. She'd come straight from her shift, still in her scrubs, just to see me in the science fair or play basketball. And before she lost her second job, were there ever any problems with the law? Any trouble at all? "No, sir, never. Mom always said we had to follow the rules, work hard, be honest." "What changed?" Jordan's voice caught. He looked at his mother, saw the tears rolling down her cheeks. "Everything changed when she lost the convenience store job. Bills started piling up. The landlord kept leaving notices on our door. But Mom, she kept trying. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital when she could. She sold everything we could spare, including her wedding ring. Isn't that right?" Jordan nodded, remembering the day she came home without it. She tried to hide her hand, but he'd noticed right away. "Yes." She said it was just metal and stone, that keeping our apartment was more important. Mr. Richards walked closer to the stand. "Jordan, in all this time, did your mother ever buy anything for herself? New clothes? Shoes? Anything?" "No, sir, she wore the same scrubs until they had holes. She kept saying she'd get new ones next month, but next month never came. Everything went to rent and food and my school supplies. And speaking of school, how are your grades, Jordan?" "Straight A's. Sir, Mom says education is the most important thing, that it's our way to a better life." The lawyer nodded approvingly. "Even with all these problems at home, you've maintained perfect grades. That must take a lot of work." "Yes, Sir, Mom helps me study every night, even when she's exhausted from her shift. She says." Jordan's voice cracked. He took a deep breath. "She says I'm going to be the first one in our family to go to college." Mr. Richards let that hang in the air for a moment. "Jordan, I need to ask you something difficult now. Why do you think your mother didn't ask for help from food banks or charity organizations?" Jordan's hands twisted in his lap. "She did at first, but they said her nursing salary was too high to qualify, even though it barely covers rent and utilities. And she said she was embarrassed. She's always been the one helping others, you know? At the hospital, she takes extra shifts so other nurses can be with their kids. She volunteers at church when she can. Asking for help made her feel like she failed." "Failed at what?" "At being my mom," Jordan whispered, his voice breaking. "But she didn't fail. She's the best mom anyone could have. She only did what she did because of me. Because I was hungry and she couldn't stand to see it anymore." The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the prosecutor had stopped shuffling his papers. "One last question, Jordan," Mr. Richards said softly. "If you could say anything to the judge right now about your mother, what would it be?" Jordan looked directly at Judge Thompson for the first time. Her stern expression hadn't changed, but she was watching him intently. I'd say, please don't take her away from me. She made a mistake, but she only did it because she loves me so much. She's not a criminal. She's just a mom who ran out of options." His voice grew stronger. "I'd say look at her whole life, not just these past few months. Look at how hard she works, how much she cares about everyone else. Look at how she raised me by herself. Never complained, never gave up. Tears were flowing freely down his face now. But he kept going. I'd say she deserves a chance to make this right. She doesn't need punishment. She needs help. We both do. But mostly, I'd say that I need her. She's all I have. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Jordan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the tears dripping onto his hands. Judge Thompson was still watching him, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Jordan," Mr. Richards said quietly. "No further questions." The prosecutor stood up. "Redirect, Your Honor." Judge Thompson shook her head. "I think we've heard enough from this young man. You may step down, Jordan." As Jordan walked back to his seat, his legs felt like they might give out. Mrs. Martinez steadied him as he sat down. He couldn't look at his mother. He was afraid of what he might see in her face. "Your Honor," Mr. Richards continued, "as we've heard today, Sarah Williams is not a career criminal. She's a dedicated mother and healthcare worker who found herself in an impossible situation. Yes, she broke the law, and she admits that. But I asked the court to consider the circumstances and her previously spotless record." The prosecutor stood up. "The state acknowledges Ms. Williams' difficult circumstances, Your Honor. However, the law must be applied equally to all. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment, but a pattern of behavior that continued despite warnings and offers of assistance." Judge Thompson held up her hand. "I've heard enough from both sides." She turned her gaze to Jordan's mother. "Ms. Williams, please stand." Jordan held his breath as his mother stood shakily, the handcuffs clinking. "Before I render my decision," Judge Thompson said, "do you have anything you'd like to say to the court?" His mother's voice was quiet but steady. "Only that I'm sorry, Your Honor. Not for trying to feed my son. I'll never be sorry for that. But I'm sorry for breaking the law, for taking what wasn't mine, for setting a bad example. Jordan deserves better than that." Judge Thompson nodded slowly. "I see." She picked up her gavel, and Jordan felt his heart stop. The choice had been made. The truth had been told. Now all they could do was wait for the judgment to fall. Judge Thompson set down her gavel without using it. The sound of it touching the wooden desk echoed in the silent courtroom. She folded her hands and leaned forward, her glasses reflecting the fluorescent lights. "Before I make my decision, there's something else I need to address," she said. "Jordan, would you return to the stand one more time?" Jordan's stomach dropped. What else could they possibly want to know? He stood up, his legs shaking worse than before. As he passed the defense table, his mother reached out slightly, her handcuffs preventing her from touching him. After being sworn in yet again, Jordan sat in the witness chair. It wasn't any more comfortable the third time. "Jordan," Judge Thompson said, speaking directly to him for the first time, "I want you to tell me about an average day in your life. Start with breakfast." He swallowed hard. Well, I usually wake up around 6. Mom's already gone to her hospital shift by then, but she leaves me cereal or oatmeal on the counter. At least she used to. And now sometimes there's nothing. I drink water to feel full before school." "Continue. What about lunch?" Jordan's hands twisted in his lap. "The school has a free lunch program. I started using it 2 months ago. Mom didn't want me to at first, said it might make people talk. But then she saw how hungry I was getting and filled out the forms, and after school, I go home, do my homework. Mom gets back around 7, unless she has an extra shift. She's usually really tired, but she always asks about my day and checks my homework. What about dinner?" Jordan's voice got quieter. "Sometimes we have enough for both of us. Sometimes Mom says she ate at work, but I know she's lying. Sometimes," he paused, fighting back tears, "sometimes we just go to bed hungry." The judge's expression softened slightly. "When did this start? The food shortages?" "After Mom lost her second job. The convenience store where she worked evenings got bought out, and the new owners cut her position. She tried to find another part-time job, but nothing paid as much, and she was already working so many hours at the hospital. Tell me about the hospital work." "She's a nurse in the emergency room. Has been for 15 years. She loves it, even though it's really hard. She comes home with stories about helping people, saving lives. But lately, she comes home crying more." "Why is that?" Jordan looked at his mother, saw her drop her head in shame, because she has to watch other people's kids get help when they're sick or hurt, but she can't even feed her own son. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Thompson waited for silence before continuing. Did you ever ask neighbors for help? Your church? Mom tried. Our neighbors are nice, but they're struggling too. The church food bank helped a few times, but they can only give so much to each family. And Mom, she stopped going because she said other families needed it more. What about your father? Have you had any contact with him? Jordan's fists clenched. No. He left 3 years ago. Said he was going to the store and never came back. No calls, no letters, nothing. Mom tried to find him for child support, but he just disappeared. How did that affect your mother? She worked harder, picked up more shifts, started the convenience store job. She said we didn't need him, that we'd make it on our own. Jordan's voice cracked. She did everything right, worked so hard, never complained. It's not fair that she's in handcuffs just because she wanted to feed me. The judge nodded slowly. Tell me about the first time you realized your mother might be stealing food. Jordan's throat tightened. This was the hardest part, the truth he'd been trying to avoid. It was about 3 months ago. I came home from school, and there was bread in the kitchen. Fresh bread. I knew we couldn't afford it, but I was so hungry. I didn't ask where it came from. I didn't want to know. Did it happen again? Yes. Little things would appear: peanut butter, lunch meat, fruit. Mom would say she found good sales, or that someone at work gave them to her. I pretended to believe her. Why? Because... Jordan's voice broke completely. He took a shaky breath. Because I was hungry. Because I could hear her crying at night when she thought I was asleep. Because she was trying so hard and nothing was working, and I just wanted her to know she was still a good mom. Tears were flowing freely now. Jordan didn't try to wipe them away. Your Honor, the prosecutor started to stand, but Judge Thompson held up her hand. I'm not finished, she said firmly. Jordan, I have one more question. What do you want to be when you grow up? The question caught him off guard. I want to be a doctor, he said quietly. Mom says if I study hard and get scholarships, I can do it. She says she'll work as many jobs as it takes to help me get there. And how are your grades? All A's. Mom helps me study every night, even when she's exhausted. She says education is our way out. Judge Thompson leaned back in her chair. Thank you, Jordan. That will be all. But as Jordan started to stand, words burst out of him. Please don't send her to jail. Please. I'll get a job after school. I'll help more. I'll do anything. Just please don't take her away from me. The courtroom was completely silent. Jordan could feel everyone staring at him, but he kept his eyes on the judge, pleading silently. Judge Thompson's face remained stern, but her voice was gentler when she spoke. You may step down now, Jordan. He walked back to his seat on shaky legs. Mrs. Martinez put an arm around his shoulders as he sat down. He could hear sniffling from somewhere behind him, probably his classmates or their parents. Ms. Williams, the judge said, please stand. Jordan watched his mother rise slowly, the handcuffs seeming to weigh her down. Her face was wet with tears, but she stood straight and faced the judge. I've heard a lot of cases in this courtroom, Judge Thompson began. I've seen a lot of people try to justify breaking the law. But I've rarely seen a case quite like this one. She paused, looking down at her papers. Jordan held his breath. The law is clear about theft. It's a crime, regardless of circumstances. And you, Ms. Williams, have admitted to multiple instances of theft. She looked up, fixing Jordan's mother with a stern gaze. However, the law also allows for judicial discretion in sentencing, taking into account the totality of circumstances. Jordan felt his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. His mother stood perfectly still, waiting. Before I announce my decision, Judge Thompson continued, I want to be very clear about something. What you did was wrong. You broke the law multiple times. You set a poor example for your son, who clearly adores you and looks to you for guidance. Jordan saw his mother flinch at those words, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. However, the judge's voice softened slightly. I also see a mother who has worked tirelessly to provide for her child. I see a healthcare worker who serves her community. I see a woman who, when faced with an impossible choice between obeying the law and feeding her son, chose her child. She picked up her gavel, and Jordan felt the world stop. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Thompson still held her gavel, studying Jordan's mother with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he couldn't. Everything hung on what would happen next. Ms. Williams, the judge continued, before I pronounce sentence, I want to hear more about your work at Johns Hopkins Hospital. How long have you been in the emergency department? His mother's voice trembled slightly. 15 years, Your Honor. I started as a new graduate nurse and worked my way up to charge nurse on night shift. And what are your duties there? I oversee patient care during the overnight hours, coordinate with doctors, manage staff assignments, handle emergencies as they come in. She straightened slightly, and for a moment Jordan saw a flash of the confident nurse she used to be. I love my job, Your Honor. I love helping people on their worst days. Yet you work in one of the best hospitals in the country and still can't afford to feed your son. How is that possible? His mother's shoulders slumped. The base pay is decent, Your Honor, but not enough for Baltimore rent prices. I used to make it work with a second job, but after losing that, she swallowed hard. The hospital has good benefits, health insurance for Jordan. I couldn't risk looking for another nursing job and losing that coverage. Have you spoken to hospital administration about your situation? No, Your Honor. She looked down at her hands. I was ashamed. I'm supposed to be a professional, someone who helps others. How could I admit I couldn't even feed my own child? Jordan felt tears burning his eyes again. He'd seen that shame every time his mother opened empty cupboards, every time she made excuses about already eating at work. Mr. Thompson, the judge turned to the store manager, who stood quickly. In your earlier testimony, you mentioned offering to help Ms. Williams apply for food assistance programs. What specifically did you suggest? The manager shifted uncomfortably. Well, Your Honor, I gave her information about local food banks, SNAP benefits, and the Maryland Food Supplement Program. But as she said, her base salary was just over the qualification limits, even though she clearly couldn't afford basic necessities. Yes, Your Honor, the guidelines are strict. She fell into what we sometimes call the assistance gap, making too much to qualify for help, but not enough to actually get by. Judge Thompson nodded slowly. A situation all too common in our city. She turned back to Jordan's mother. Ms. Williams, walk me through your monthly expenses. His mother took a shaky breath. Rent is $1,400 for our one-bedroom apartment. Utilities average $200. Jordan's school supplies and clothes, about $100 when I can manage it. Bus passes for both of us, $100. My nursing license renewal fees, malpractice insurance, continuing education requirements, that's about $200 a month if I spread it across the year. Then there's your take-home pay from the hospital, about $2,300 a month after taxes and health insurance, Your Honor. The judge did some quick math, leaving you approximately $300 for food and all other expenses. For two people? Yes, Your Honor. His mother's voice was barely a whisper. And before losing your second job, I brought home another $800 a month from the convenience store. It was enough. We weren't rich, but we got by. I could keep food in the house at least. Jordan remembered those days. Not having much, but always having enough. His mother tired from working double shifts, but smiling as she made dinner. Now he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her really smile. Jordan, the judge called suddenly, making him jump. One more question for you. He stood on shaky legs, not bothering to return to the witness stand. Yes, Your Honor. When was the last time you had a full meal? And be honest, not just a sandwich or some snacks, but a real, complete meal. Jordan felt his face burn with shame. He could feel everyone staring at him, waiting. Last Thursday, he finally said, at school lunch. And your mother? When did you last see her eat a full meal? His voice cracked. I don't remember. The silence that followed was deafening. Jordan heard someone crying softly in the gallery, maybe one of his classmates' mothers. Judge Thompson's face remained stern, but something flickered in her eyes. Ms. Williams, she said, would you say that assessment is accurate? His mother nodded, unable to speak through her tears. So let me make sure I understand the situation correctly. Judge Thompson removed her glasses, fixing Jordan's mother with a direct stare. You are a trained medical professional with 15 years of experience saving lives. You work at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country. You have no criminal record prior to these incidents. You maintain a stable home for your son, ensure he excels in school, and by all accounts are a devoted mother. Yet you found yourself in a position where you had to steal basic food items to prevent your child from going hungry. Yes, Your Honor. His mother's voice was thick with shame, and instead of asking for help, you chose to commit theft. Multiple times. Why? Because his mother's shoulders began to shake. Because every time I asked for help, the doors closed in my face. Too much income for food stamps. Too much for assistance programs. The food banks could only give so much. I sold everything we could spare. I picked up every extra shift I could get. Nothing was enough. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I know what I did was wrong. I tell Jordan every day that we have to follow the rules, be honest, work hard. But when I heard him crying in his room because his stomach hurt from hunger, when I saw him drinking water to try to feel full, her voice broke completely. What kind of mother watches her child go hungry when there's food right there in the store? What kind of mother chooses following the law over feeding her son? The courtroom was completely silent except for muffled sobs, not just from the gallery now, but from the court clerk, even from Mrs. Martinez beside Jordan. The prosecutor stared at his papers, his earlier coldness gone. Jordan couldn't take it anymore. "Mom," he called out, his voice breaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I hadn't told you I was hungry, if I hadn't complained—" "No." His mother turned to him, straining against her handcuffs. "No, baby, don't ever think that. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. You're a child. You're supposed to tell your mother when you're hungry. I'm the one who failed. I'm the one who couldn't figure out a better way." "Order," Judge Thompson called, but her voice was gentler than before. "Ms. Williams, please face the bench." His mother turned back, wiping her face on her shoulder since her hands were still cuffed. "I have one final question," the judge said. "If you are released today, what will prevent this from happening again? Your financial situation hasn't changed. Your son will still be hungry. The food will still be there in the store. Why should I believe you won't make the same choice again?" Jordan held his breath. Everything hinged on his mother's answer. She stood straighter, meeting the judge's eyes. "Because now I understand that my pride hurt my son more than asking for help ever could. Because he deserves a mother he can be proud of, not one he has to lie for or make excuses for. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. I'll stand in every food bank line in the city. I'll do whatever it takes to feed my son legally, even if it means swallowing my pride. Just please give me the chance to show him that I can be better, that I can fix this the right way." Judge Thompson studied her for a long moment. Then she picked up her gavel once more. Jordan's heart stopped. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. He reached for Mrs. Martinez's hand, squeezing so hard it must have hurt, but she didn't pull away. The judge raised her gavel, and Jordan closed his eyes. The gavel stayed raised in Judge Thompson's hand. Jordan opened his eyes, unable to bear not seeing what was about to happen. The courtroom remained deathly quiet, every person holding their breath. "Before I make my final decision," Judge Thompson said, lowering the gavel without striking it, "I want to share something with this court." She removed her glasses, placing them carefully on the bench. 20 years ago, before I became a judge, I was a single mother myself." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jordan saw his mother's shoulders tense. "I know what it's like to look in your child's eyes when they're hungry. I know the shame of having a professional career and still not being able to make ends meet. I know what it means to fall into that gap, making too much for assistance but too little to survive." She paused, her stern expression softening slightly. "I also know that breaking the law is never the answer, no matter how desperate the situation. Ms. Williams, you made the wrong choice. Multiple times." Jordan's mother nodded, tears falling silently. "However," the judge continued, "I also believe in justice that restores rather than simply punishes." "Mr. Peterson?" The prosecutor stood quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. If I were to suspend Ms. Williams' sentence on the condition that she complete community service and pay restitution to the store, would the state object?" "No, Your Honor," he replied, glancing at Mr. Thompson, who shook his head. "The state's primary concern is preventing future incidents, not punishment. Judge Thompson nodded. Ms. Williams, look at me. Jordan watched his mother raise her head, meeting the judge's gaze. I'm going to make you an offer, but before I do, I want to be very clear about something. If you accept this deal and violate any of its terms, you will serve the full sentence for theft. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, his mother said firmly. Good. Here are my terms. First, you will pay full restitution to Martin Supermarket for all stolen items, including those from the previous incidents. Mr. Thompson has provided documentation totaling $342.87. You will set up a payment plan with the court clerk. She paused, making sure Jordan's mother was following. Second, you will complete 100 hours of community service. However, she held up a hand as the prosecutor started to speak. Given your nursing skills, I'm going to be specific about how those hours are served. Are you familiar with the Hope Clinic? Yes, Your Honor. It's a free clinic in West Baltimore. Correct. They're desperately short on nursing staff. Your community service will be completed there, working one shift per week until your hours are fulfilled. They work around regular hospital schedules, so this shouldn't interfere with your Hopkins job. Jordan felt a tiny spark of hope in his chest. This didn't sound like his mother was going to jail. Third, Judge Thompson continued, you will meet weekly with a court-appointed financial counselor who will help you create a budget and explore all available assistance programs. Pride can no longer be a factor in accepting help that you qualify for. His mother nodded vigorously. Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. Fourth, you will maintain your employment at Johns Hopkins. However, she picked up a piece of paper from her desk. I took the liberty of making a phone call during our recess. The hospital's nursing director confirms they have an opening for a permanent night shift charge nurse position. It comes with a significant pay increase and would eliminate the need for a second job. The position is yours if you want it. Jordan saw his mother's hands start shaking in the handcuffs. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Yes. Don't thank me. You earned that position through 15 years of service. Your current situation doesn't negate your qualifications. The judge's voice hardened again. However, if you lose or leave this job without court approval before completing your probation, you will serve your full sentence. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. Completely clear. Finally, Judge Thompson leaned forward, her voice becoming stern again. You will write a letter of apology to Mr. Thompson and the store staff. Not for being hungry or desperate, but for betraying their previous kindness when they tried to help you. They showed you mercy twice, and you repaid them by stealing again. That requires acknowledgement. Jordan's mother turned to Mr. Thompson. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice cracking. You were kind to me, and I took advantage of that. It was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. The store manager nodded, his own eyes looking suspiciously wet. Do you accept these terms, Ms. Williams? Judge Thompson asked. Yes, Your Honor. Gratefully. Very well. The judge finally brought down her gavel. Taking into account your previous clean record, your guilty plea, and the unusual circumstances of this case, I hereby suspend your sentence pending completion of all terms discussed. You will be on probation for 1 year. Jordan felt his heart restart. Suspended sentence. Probation. That meant, Officer, Judge Thompson addressed the bailiff. Please remove Ms. Williams' handcuffs. The sound of the cuffs unlocking echoed in the quiet courtroom. Jordan watched his mother bring her hands forward slowly, rubbing her wrists. Ms. Williams, the judge said, her voice softer now, I want you to understand something. This court is showing you mercy today, not because what you did was right, but because punishing you would only create more victims, starting with your son. You're being given a chance to make this right, to show him that there are legal ways out of desperate situations. Don't waste it. I won't, Your Honor. I promise. Jordan, the judge called, making him jump. Stand up, please. He stood on shaky legs, feeling everyone's eyes on him. Young man, I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Your mother broke the law, and that was wrong. But you did exactly right today. You told the truth, even though it was difficult. You showed remarkable maturity and courage. Your mother is clearly doing something right in raising you. Jordan felt tears rolling down his cheeks again, but for the first time today, they weren't entirely from sadness. However, Judge Thompson continued, I never want to see you in my courtroom again. Not like this. If you need help, ask for it. If your mother needs help, tell someone. There are people and programs ready to assist. Pride is a luxury that neither you nor your mother can afford right now. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Jordan managed to say. Good. She turned back to his mother. Ms. Williams, report to the court clerk to arrange your payment plan and get your paperwork for the Hope Clinic. Your first meeting with the financial counselor will be scheduled for next week. The nursing director at Hopkins is expecting your call this afternoon about the night shift position. She raised her gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. The crack of the gavel made Jordan jump, but this time it was the best sound he'd ever heard. His mother was already moving toward him, arms outstretched. He ran to her, not caring who saw him crying as she wrapped him in a tight hug. I'm so sorry, baby, she whispered against his hair. I'm so sorry for everything. But I'm going to make it right. I promise. I know, Mom, he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. I know you will. He felt Mrs. Martinez pat his back as she passed. I'll be in touch about the financial counseling meetings, she said. But for now, just go home and get some rest. Both of you. Jordan pulled back slightly to look at his mother's face. The shame and fear were still there in her eyes, but something else too, determination, maybe. Hope. Ready to go home? She asked, wiping tears from his cheeks. He nodded, taking her hand, her free, uncuffed hand. As they walked toward the courtroom doors, he heard Judge Thompson's voice one more time. Ms. Williams. They turned back. The judge had removed her robes, looking somehow more human without them. The night shift position at Hopkins includes an immediate pay increase, health insurance, and access to the hospital's emergency assistance fund for employees. Make sure you ask about that last part when you call. His mother's hand tightened around his. Thank you, Your Honor. For everything. The judge nodded once, then turned away. As Jordan walked out of the courtroom with his mother, he felt lighter than he had in months. They still had problems to face, bills to pay, restitution to make, pride to swallow. But they would face them together, legally, with help. And tonight, for the first time in too long, they would both eat dinner. The hallway outside the courtroom felt different now. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but they seemed brighter somehow. Jordan walked beside his mother, not letting go of her hand, as they made their way to the clerk's office. Mrs. Williams? A voice called from behind them. They turned to see Mr. Thompson, the store manager, walking quickly to catch up. Jordan felt his mother tense beside him. I just wanted to say. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. I'm glad things worked out this way. I never wanted to press charges, but company policy. He trailed off, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. Here, this is my direct number at the store. When you get back on your feet, come see me. We have a community partnership program with local nurses, health education, blood pressure screenings, that sort of thing. It's paid work, and it might help make up for the income you lost from your second job. Jordan's mother took the card with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say. After what I did, you made a mistake, Mr. Thompson cut in. You're making it right. That's what matters. He glanced at Jordan. Besides, any kid who works that hard in school deserves a chance at a better future. Thank you, Jordan's mother whispered. Mr. Thompson nodded once and walked away. Jordan watched him go, remembering how scared he'd been of the man just hours ago. Now he just seemed like someone trying to help. At the clerk's office, they waited while a bored-looking woman typed their information into a computer. Okay, Mrs. Williams. Your restitution payment plan is set up for $28.57 per month over 12 months. First payment is due in 30 days. She handed over a stack of papers. These are your probation terms, community service forms for the Hope Clinic, and information about your financial counseling appointments. His mother took the papers, holding them like they were made of gold. When do I need to call Hopkins about the new position? The clerk checked her computer. Judge Thompson left a note here. Nursing Director Margaret Chun is expecting your call before 5 p.m. today. She looked up with the first hint of a smile Jordan had seen from her. Congratulations on the promotion. They left the courthouse into bright afternoon sunlight. Jordan squinted, realizing he'd been inside for hours. His stomach growled loudly. reminding him he hadn't eaten since the night before. His mother heard it and her face fell. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Let's get some food right now." "But Mom, we don't have—" He stopped, remembering they still had no money. Actually, Mrs. Martinez appeared behind them, making them both jump. "Part of my job is providing emergency assistance while families get back on their feet." She held out a plastic card. "This is loaded with $200 for groceries. It'll help until your first paycheck from the new position comes in." Jordan's mother started to shake her head, but Mrs. Martinez held up her hand. "Remember what the judge said about pride? This isn't charity. It's a support system doing its job. Take it." Slowly, his mother reached out and took the card. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For being there for Jordan when—" Her voice broke. "That's what I'm here for," Mrs. Martinez smiled. "Now go get some groceries. I'll see you next week for the first financial counseling session." They took the bus to Martin's supermarket, not the one where his mother had been caught stealing, but another branch across town. Jordan watched his mother's hand shake as she picked up a basket. "Okay," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "What should we get first?" Jordan looked around at the aisles of food. So much food, all of it legally available to them now. Can we get stuff for spaghetti? Like you used to make?" His mother's eyes filled with tears again, but she was smiling. "Of course, baby. And garlic bread, too." He nodded, feeling his own eyes water. Such a simple thing, buying food in a store. Something most people did without thinking twice. But for them, right now it felt like a miracle. They filled their basket carefully, checking prices, making sure they stayed within their budget. Pasta sauce, ground beef, bread, fresh fruit, apples, and bananas. Milk, eggs, cereal. When they got to the checkout, Jordan held his breath, half expecting something to go wrong. But the card worked perfectly, and soon they were carrying bags of legally purchased groceries out of the store. On the bus ride home, Jordan kept looking at the bags between their feet, hardly believing they were real. His mother hadn't let go of the stack of papers from court, like she was afraid they might disappear if she put them down. "I need to call Hopkins when we get home," she said quietly. "About the night shift position?" Jordan nodded. "Will you have to work different hours?" "Probably. Night shift usually means 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But it's more money, Jordan. Enough that we won't need a second job." She squeezed his hand. "I'll still be able to help with your homework before my shift. And I'll be home in time to make you breakfast before school. And we'll be able to buy food," he said. "Real food from the store without—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," she said firmly. "No more stealing. No more lies. No more shame." She looked down at the papers in her lap. "It won't be easy. We have a lot to pay back, a lot to make right. But we'll do it the right way this time." They got off at their stop and walked the 3 blocks to their apartment building. Everything looked the same cracked sidewalks, same graffiti on the walls, same broken elevator that meant walking up 4 flights of stairs. But something felt different. Inside their small apartment, Jordan helped put away the groceries while his mother called Hopkins. He tried not to listen too obviously, but he could hear her voice shaking as she spoke to the nursing director. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. I understand the responsibilities. Yes, I can start next week. The salary increase would make a huge difference. No more second job needed." When she hung up, she sat down hard at the kitchen table, hands pressed to her face. "Mom?" Jordan asked anxiously. "Is everything okay?" She looked up, and to his surprise, she was smiling through her tears. "The position, it comes with a $15,000 annual raise, plus shift differentials for nights and weekends. And there's an employee emergency fund that can help with rent until we get caught up." Jordan felt his knees go weak. He sat down across from her. "So we'll be okay?" "We'll be okay," she confirmed. "It'll take time to fix everything, but we'll make it." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Jordan, I am so sorry for what I put you through, for making you lie, for setting such a terrible example." "Mom, stop," he interrupted. "You kept me alive. You kept us together. Yeah, you made some mistakes, but you're fixing them. That's what matters, right?" "That's what the judge said." She smiled shakily. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a pretty good teacher," he said, even if she got a little lost for a while. His mother stood up, wiping her eyes. "Well, This teacher is going to make her son some real dinner for the first time in too long. Want to help? Jordan got up and joined her at the counter. They worked together, boiling pasta, browning meat, warming bread. Simple things that had seemed impossible just hours ago. The smell of real food cooking filled their small apartment, replacing the emptiness that had lived there for too long. As they sat down to eat their first proper meal in months, Jordan looked at his mother across the table. She had dark circles under her eyes from stress and lack of sleep. Her scrubs were still wrinkled from court, but the shame and fear that had haunted her face lately were fading, replaced by something stronger: determination, hope, the will to make things right. "Mom," he said, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "Yes, baby? I'm proud of you. For telling the truth in court. For accepting help. For not giving up." Her eyes filled with tears again, but she smiled. "I'm proud of you too, Jordan. So proud. And I promise you, things are going to be different now. Better." He nodded, taking a bite of garlic bread, real bread, legally bought, still warm from the oven. "I know they will be," he said. "We'll make sure of it." Together, outside their window, the sun was setting on one of the hardest days of their lives. But for the first time in months, Jordan wasn't dreading tomorrow. Tomorrow meant a fresh start. Tomorrow meant doing things the right way. Tomorrow meant never having to watch his mother cry over empty cupboards again. Tonight, they would eat. Tomorrow, they would begin to rebuild. The next morning felt different. Jordan woke up to the smell of eggs cooking, real eggs, from their shopping trip yesterday. For a moment, he lay in bed, worried it had all been a dream. But then he heard his mother humming in the kitchen, a sound he hadn't heard in months. "Morning, baby," she called out when he emerged from his room. She stood at the stove in fresh scrubs, her hair neatly pulled back. "Breakfast is almost ready." 2 plates sat on their small table, each with scrambled eggs and toast. A glass of milk, real milk, not just water, waited by his plate. Jordan sat down, still half expecting everything to disappear. "I called the Hope Clinic this morning," his mother said, joining him at the table. "They were so excited about having another nurse. I start my community service hours this Saturday." Jordan took a bite of eggs, savoring the warm, real food. "What about the night shift at Hopkins?" "I start training next week. 3 12-hour shifts per week, with the option for a 4th if we need the extra money." She smiled. "And guess what?" The nursing director said, "They'll work my schedule around your school events. I won't have to miss anything important." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Through their window, Jordan could see the morning sun hitting the brick buildings across the street. Everything looked clearer somehow, brighter. "Ready for school?" his mother asked as they finished eating. "Your classmates? They might have questions about yesterday." Jordan stacked their plates in the sink. "I know, but I'm not ashamed anymore. We had problems, we got help, we're fixing things. That's what matters, right?" His mother pulled him into a tight hug. "Right? And Jordan? I packed you a lunch today. A real lunch." He felt tears prick his eyes as she handed him a paper bag. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, and even a small bag of chips. Normal things that had seemed impossible just days ago. The walk to school felt different too. His mother held his hand, something he usually thought he was too old for, but today he didn't mind. They passed Martin's supermarket, the one where everything had happened, and his mother's steps faltered slightly. "I need to write that apology letter to Mr. Thompson," she said quietly. "Wanting to help?" She squeezed his hand. "No, baby. That's something I need to do myself. But thank you." At the school gates, she hugged him extra tight. "I'll be home when you get back. We have that financial counseling appointment at 4. Remember?" Jordan nodded. "It'll be okay, Mom. We're doing things right now." She touched his cheek gently. "When did my baby boy get so grown up?" "Around the same time my mom got brave enough to ask for help," he replied. He watched her walk away, standing straighter than she had in months. Then he turned to face the school building. He could already see some of his classmates pointing, whispering. Kevin, who had been at the courthouse yesterday, was walking toward him. "Hey," Kevin said awkwardly. About yesterday." Jordan braced himself, but Kevin surprised him. "My dad, the court clerk? He said your mom was really brave. That most people would have just kept lying, but she told the truth and is trying to make things right." "Yeah," Jordan said quietly. "She is. Anyway, I just wanted to say, if you ever need to talk or anything, Jordan managed a small smile. Thanks, Kevin. The school day passed in a blur of concerned teachers and curious classmates. Jordan's English teacher pulled him aside after class. I saw what happened in court yesterday, she said softly. My husband is a bailiff there. If you need any extra time on assignments, or just someone to talk to, thank you, Jordan replied. But I think we're going to be okay now. Really okay. After school, he met his mother outside. She had changed into regular clothes, jeans, and a clean shirt she'd washed at the laundromat during her lunch break. They walked together to the social services office for their first financial counseling session. The counselor, Mr. Rodriguez, had a kind face and an office full of papers. The goal, he explained, is to create a sustainable budget and connect you with every resource you qualify for. Judge Thompson was right. You fell into the assistance gap, but there are programs that can help. He spread some forms on his desk. First, let's look at your new income with the Hopkins night shift position. After taxes, you'll be bringing home about $3,800 monthly. That's a significant improvement. Jordan watched his mother's hands clench in her lap. But we have so much to catch up on. Back rent, utilities, the restitution payments. Which is why we're here, Mr. Rodriguez said gently. The hospital's employee emergency fund can help with the back rent. There's a utility assistance program you qualify for. Food stamps might still be a stretch with a new salary, but there are food banks and community programs that can help fill the gaps legally. He pulled out more papers. The key is building a sustainable budget. No more robbing Peter to pay Paul. No more choosing between electricity and food. We'll map out every dollar, build an emergency fund, maybe even start a college savings account for Jordan. Jordan saw his mother's eyes fill with tears at those words. College had seemed like an impossible dream lately. It won't be easy, Mr. Rodriguez continued. You'll need to be strict with the budget, especially at first. But it's doable. You're not alone in this anymore. They spent the next hour going over numbers, making lists, filling out applications. Jordan watched his mother's face as things started to make sense, as impossible problems began to look manageable. One more thing, Mr. Rodriguez said as they were finishing. The Hope Clinic called. They're so impressed with your qualifications that they want to offer you a permanent part-time position after your community service hours are complete. 4 hours a week, working around your Hopkins schedule. It would fulfill your probation requirements and provide some extra income. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. But after what I did, they believe in second chances, Mr. Rodriguez said simply. Just like Judge Thompson does. Outside the office, the sun was setting. Jordan and his mother walked to the bus stop, their arms full of papers and applications and hope. Are you hungry? His mother asked. We could stop at the grocery store on the way home. We still have money on that card Mrs. Martinez gave us. Jordan thought about it. Could we make chicken and rice? Like you used to? With the broccoli you pretend to hate, but always eat anyway, she smiled. Yeah, and maybe we could eat at the table together? Like we used to. His mother pulled him close, right there at the bus stop. Of course, baby. That's how it should be. That's how it's going to be from now on. They rode the bus to the store, a different store, not Martin's, not yet. They bought their groceries legally, carefully, checking prices and planning meals. Jordan watched his mother count out the money on the card. Her hands steady now, no shame in her eyes. At home, they cooked together. Simple food, honest food. The apartment filled with good smells and quiet conversation. They sat at their small table, saying grace for the first time in months, thanking God for second chances and fresh starts. Mom, Jordan said as they were washing dishes. Are you scared? About everything changing? She dried her hands slowly. A little. But you know what scares me more? The thought of not changing. Of staying stuck in that desperate place, doing wrong things for right reasons. She turned to face him. I'm not proud of what I did. I'll probably always be ashamed of it. But I'm proud of what we're doing now. Asking for help, following the rules, making things right. That's what I want you to remember from all this. Jordan nodded, understanding that it's never too late to start over, to do things the right way. Exactly, she pulled him close. And that no matter what happens, we face it together. No more secrets, no more shame. Outside their window, the city lights were coming on. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, community service hours to arrange, a new work schedule to learn, a tight budget to follow. But tonight, in their small apartment that felt like home again, they had food in their kitchen, hope in their hearts, and each other. Sometimes, Jordan realized, mercy comes in unexpected ways, through stern judges and kind store managers, through social workers and financial counselors, through second chances and fresh starts. And sometimes, mercy looks like a mother and son doing dishes together, planning tomorrow's meals, building a new life one honest moment at a time. 1 month after the court hearing, Jordan sat at their kitchen table, doing homework while his mother prepared for her night shift at Hopkins. The apartment smelled like the lasagna they'd had for dinner, a real dinner, made with groceries they'd bought legally from the store. The refrigerator hummed quietly, no longer empty. "Don't forget, Mrs. Martinez is coming for our weekly check-in tomorrow morning," his mother called from her room, where she was changing into her scrubs. "And I have my community service shift at the Hope Clinic after that." "I remember," Jordan said, looking up from his math homework. "How many hours do you have left?" 62. She emerged from her room, straightening her badge. "But honestly, I might keep volunteering there even after I finish my required hours. There's something good about helping people who really need it." Jordan watched her gather her things for work. She looked different now, still tired sometimes, but not beaten down like before. The shame that used to hang over her like a shadow was gone. A knock at the door made them both jump slightly. Old habits die hard. But it was just their neighbor, Mrs. Chun, dropping off her son Tommy. "Thank you again for watching him before school," Mrs. Chun said, handing over Tommy's backpack. "The early hospital shift is so hard." "It's no problem at all," Jordan's mother smiled. "Jordan helps Tommy with his homework, and it's nice having company in the mornings." This was new, this helping others again, this being part of the community. Ever since the court hearing, since they'd started being honest about their struggles, neighbors had started reaching out. Mrs. Chun worked early shifts at the hospital cafeteria. Jordan's mother watched Tommy in the mornings. The Rodriguez family down the hall shared their Wi-Fi. Jordan's mother helped their daughter with college nursing program applications. "Ready for bed, baby?" his mother asked Tommy, who nodded sleepily. "Jordan, can you get him settled on the couch while I finish getting ready?" Jordan led Tommy to the couch, which was made up with clean sheets and a warm blanket. Another new thing, being able to help others even while they were still getting back on their feet. "Your mom seems happier," Tommy said as he climbed under the blanket. "My mom says she smiles more now." "Yeah," Jordan agreed. "She does." His mother came out of her room, nursing bag over her shoulder. "Okay, everything's set for morning. Jordan, there's breakfast for both you and Tommy in the fridge. I'll be home at 8 to get you both to school." She kissed Jordan's forehead, then tucked the blanket around Tommy. At the door, she paused. "Oh, and don't forget," Mr. Thompson called. "The community health fair at Martin's is next weekend. He wants us both there." Jordan nodded. They hadn't been back to that particular Martin's store since the court hearing, but his mother had been exchanging emails with Mr. Thompson about the health education program. Small steps, building trust again. After his mother left, Jordan finished his homework while Tommy slept on the couch. The apartment felt different now, not just because there was food in the kitchen and bills were getting paid, but because there was no more fear, no more secrets. The next morning, Jordan woke to the smell of pancakes. His mother was home from her shift, still in her scrubs, but smiling as she cooked breakfast for him and Tommy. "Mrs. Martinez will be here in an hour," she reminded him. "And I got some good news at work last night." "What kind of news?" Jordan asked, helping Tommy set the table. "The hospital is starting a mentorship program for high school students interested in healthcare careers. I suggested they partner with your school, and they love the idea. You could shadow different departments, learn about medical careers." Jordan felt his heart skip. "Really? Like, actually see what doctors and nurses do?" "Really?" She set plates of pancakes in front of them. "See? Sometimes good things come from hard times. If we hadn't gone through everything we did, I might never have thought about connecting the hospital with local schools." After breakfast, while Tommy watched cartoons, Jordan helped his mother organize their financial paperwork for Mrs. Martinez. Everything was laid out neatly: pay stubs, bills, receipts, budget worksheets. No more hiding things, no more shame. Mrs. Martinez arrived right on time, her familiar clipboard in hand. But today, She was smiling more than usual. "I have some good news," she said as they sat down at the kitchen table. "Based on your progress this past month, steady employment, consistent payments, community service participation, I'm recommending a reduction in your probation period." Jordan watched his mother's hands tremble slightly. "Really? Really? You've done everything asked of you, and more. The Hope Clinic raves about your work. Your payment plan is on track. Most importantly," she looked at Jordan, "you've rebuilt trust with your son. That's what matters most." They went through the usual check-in, reviewing the budget, discussing upcoming expenses, planning for the future. Jordan listened as his mother talked confidently about managing their money, about building an emergency fund, about starting a small college savings account for him. "Oh, and one more thing," Mrs. Martinez said as she packed up her papers. "Judge Thompson asked about you. She'll be at the Martins Health Fair next weekend. She'd like to see how you're both doing." After Mrs. Martinez left, Jordan helped his mother get ready for her Hope Clinic shift. As she changed out of her Hopkins scrubs and her clinic ones, he noticed something different about her movements. No more shame, no more heaviness. She moved like someone who knew her place in the world again. "You know what I realized?" she said as she gathered her nursing supplies. "A month ago, I thought that court hearing was the worst day of our lives. But really, it was the day everything started to get better." Jordan nodded, understanding. "Because we finally told the truth? Asked for help?" "Exactly." She cupped his face in her hands. "I was so ashamed of needing help that I did something shameful instead. But look at us now. We're helping others even while we're still getting help ourselves. That's how community is supposed to work." She grabbed her keys, then paused. "Want to come with me to the clinic today? You could start learning about healthcare work, see if it's really what you want to do." Jordan grinned. "Yeah, I'd like that." They locked up the apartment, leaving a note for Tommy's mom about when they'd be back. In the hallway, they passed Mr. Rodriguez from next door, who was struggling with some grocery bags. "Let us help you with those," Jordan's mother said, taking a bag. Such a simple thing, helping carry groceries. But a month ago, the sight of grocery bags had brought only shame and pain. At the Hope Clinic, Jordan watched his mother work. She moved between patients with confidence and compassion, explaining things clearly, listening carefully. Some of the patients were like they had been, proud people who needed help but were ashamed to ask. His mother knew exactly what to say to put them at ease. "Sometimes," she told one worried mother, "asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." Jordan thought about everything that had changed in the past month. They still had challenges, bills to catch up on, trust to rebuild, habits to change. But they were facing everything together, honestly, with help when they needed it. That evening, back at home, Jordan worked on a school essay while his mother prepared for a night shift. The essay prompt was, "Write about a time when something difficult led to something good." He knew exactly what to write about. He wrote about a courtroom and a stern judge who showed mercy. About a store manager who offered second chances. About social workers and counselors who helped rebuild what shame had broken. Most of all, he wrote about his mother, who had made mistakes but faced them honestly, who had learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, who showed him every day that it's never too late to start over and do things right. As he finished the essay, his mother came to kiss him goodbye before her shift. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said suddenly. "Really proud." She hugged him tight, and he felt her tears on his cheek. "I'm proud of us both, baby. We're going to be okay." "I know," he said, and for the first time in a long time, he really did know it. After she left, Jordan stood at their kitchen window, looking out at the city lights. In their refrigerator, there was food bought honestly. On their table, there were bills being paid on time. In their hearts, there was hope built on truth and trust. Sometimes, he realized, the hardest days can lead to the best changes. Sometimes, rock bottom becomes a foundation to build something better. Sometimes, the end of one story is really just the beginning of a better one. And sometimes, love means telling the truth, asking for help, and starting over, together. He turned away from the window and went to check on his homework. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them the right way. With honesty, with help when they needed it, with hope. The shame was gone. The fear was gone. The lies were gone. What remained was stronger, truer, better. What remained was a fresh start. What remained was enough.